Hi everyone, can you hear me? 大家可以听到我吗？ Can everyone hear me? 如果能听到的话，请举手 ，raise your hands。因为等一下我们要提问，也是需要通过用举手或者是留言的方式。Okay, good, good. All right, so, Brian, can you turn on your camera too? Let's see.
Well, it looks like you stopped my video. It says.
Oh, did I? Let me
Yeah.
try. Okay. Okay. All right. So now I allow you to turn on the video.
Wow.
Okay. Hey. Yes. Actually, we're on the same office, but we just in a different room. Okay. All right. So can everybody hear us? Yes, I think so. Yeah, I think everything is fine. Okay. So Brian, do you mind if you make the voice a little bit louder?
Sure.
Oh, perfect. Perfect. I
Fine?
think that's perfect. Yes.
Okay.
Okay, good, good. Okay, very nice voice. Okay, anyway. All right. Okay, so everyone, very glad to be here, and we are going to have our ACT science open class finally, okay? Because I'm teaching English, and I've been teaching English for more than 15 years, and science is my headache subject, okay? Since I was in middle school, okay. All right, but I'm so happy and glad to invite Brian. Brian graduated from Stanford. Definitely is 学霸. Okay, so let's see. 学霸老师, okay, how are you going to share the experience and, what is the best way and a strategy to prepare for the ACT science test? And some parents ask us like, oh, besides the ACT science, what else we need to focus on? But we realize that a lot of students, they can do pretty good in the reading section because reading section is not really hard. And for the English section, I mean, for grammar, it can be done within like several one-on-one classes, so they can solve the problem. However, for the science part, a lot of students feel like struggle. I mean, they feel like everything is pretty easy, but they just cannot get everything correct. So when they get to the test, usually the science, lower their total score. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. So let's start it. Okay, so Brian, you can start it, and everybody, if you have any question, you can leave us in the chat box. You can just leave us the question there. Frank say you cannot hear me. Okay, so yeah, I think you can hear me. All right.
Okay.
Cool. All right. So Frank, can you hear me now? Yes. Okay. So you have to join in the webinar with I think it was with like a computer voice or call in or whatever. I think they have the reminder at the beginning. Okay, perfect. Okay. You can hear me now. All right, so now I'm gonna give this to Brian. Okay, so Brian, please tell us how to prepare for the ACT science. And I know you're like pretty, good in science and in math and in the bio and chemistry. I mean, I know you're good at everything. Okay, so yeah, so you can start it now.
Okay. Welcome everyone to our open class. As June said already. So maybe you're you just took the ACT and you looked at your science and you got your ACT scores back, and you're worried about your science score, or maybe you're just curious about the ACT, or maybe you're scared of the science section and you're wondering if you even should take the ACT. Well, you're in luck because this open class will answer more or less most of your questions. So here, give me a second. So what's covered in this class? So I've organized this class according to some of the main questions that most people have regarding the ACT science section. For example, like, why is the ACT science section even important? Why is the ACT science section often considered the hardest section on the ACT? And this one might actually surprise you a little bit, but we'll get into that later. And what does the ACT science section actually test? And what do I need to do as a student to succeed on ACT science? And then we'll move on to Q&A and other things. So why is the ACT science section important? It's one of the main differences between the SAT and the ACT. The SAT doesn't have an explicitly dedicated science section. So a lot of people who are wondering if they should be taking the ACT find themselves asking this question. So the key thing is that universities consider your ACT composite score, meaning the one score you get that covers is the average of all of your sections, more so than they consider your individual section scores. And what that means is that in regard to the science section, is that doing well in the science section can afford you more flexibility in your English, math, or reading scores if you're not so comfortable with any of those sections. Likewise, doing well in the science section prevents it from weighing down your composite score. So if you do well in all of those other sections, it's kind of a shame if your science section pulls down your score, right? So the ACT science section matters to anyone who's taking the ACT, even if you're not really considering a science career or major in college. The ACT science section is especially important for two different kinds of applicants. One is those applying to science or other quantitative majors. That's like your engineering, your pre-medicine, science, math. And the other is those who are applying to highly selective technical schools like MIT, Caltech, or any of the other major, very selective technical schools. So people who fall under these two categories will be competing against people who might have way more experience in science than yourselves, or those who might employ more strategic studying methods, or any of the combination of the two. So there will be a lot of people who get perfect scores on the ACT science section if you're in any of these two categories. So scoring poorly on the ACT science section gives schools, especially those that are very selective, a reason to doubt your ability. And so it's really important that you score well if you're interested in either of these things. But that might sound kind of scary, right? So there's a lot at stake. But the good news is that anyone is capable of scoring well in the ACT science section, even if you aren't a science geek. The ACT score in general on any section is more than anything a reflection of how hard you work and how strategically you study. And in essence, how well you know the ACT much more than the knowledge you've gained in school. So moving on to our next question, why is the ACT science section often considered the hardest section in the ACT? And a lot of people might be surprised at this question, because a lot of people, especially those who are scientifically minded or their parents, might consider the ACT science section the easiest section, because it seems like it's just regurgitating what you learned in school, right? Well, there's a lot of reasons why this is actually the hardest section. The first of which is fatigue. The ACT science section is the last section in a 3.5 or 3 hour long test. So by the time you finish your English, you finish your math, you finish your reading section, and then you move on to the ACT science section. So most people are worn out by then, and taking a 3 to 3.5 hour long test isn't something that's really trivial or comes to people really easily. So, and the best ways to combat this is to eat a good breakfast, use the breaks that you get, rest well the night before and even the night before that, and really get practice doing an entire ACT in one sitting, like you would in a normal test. Because if you don't get used to it, then you're not going to be able to do it on the day of, right? The next thing is timing. So the ACT science section is a very, very fast-paced section. And more so than, math or English. So you have 40 questions, 35 minutes, and 6 to 7 passages. We say 6 to 7 because historically, it used to be that there were always 7 passages, but in recent years we've noticed that they've been coming out with 6 passages more and more often. And while that might sound like you're getting more time, they're actually asking harder questions and more involved questions and longer passages. So it's actually making the test a bit harder and harder to score well on. And I used to have this belief that that the shorter the section, the easier the section. But that's actually not true, because really you have to go really fast on this. So you have 52.5 seconds per question, and that's not a lot. That includes reading, that includes figuring out the answer, that includes bubbling on your answer sheet. So you really don't have a lot of time. And maybe a more useful way to think about it is between 5 and 5.8 minutes per passage. So you got to go really fast. You got to work and manage time efficiently and effectively. So you have to go fast, but you have to be right. And this is really challenging for a lot of students. And it's made worse by, as I've mentioned before, most people are tired by the time they reach the section on the ACT. And the third, and maybe the most insidious or the most important one, is improper preparation. There's not a lot of effective prep material floating around on Google or online. And it's really easy to be confused as to what you really need to study for on the ACT science tests. So a lot of people end up preparing for the wrong things for their ACT science, even if they prepare well for other sections on the ACT. So now I'm going to talk about one of the biggest misconceptions that I hear from both parents and students. And that's the myth that the science section tests the scientific knowledge that I've learned in school. And this is kind of like a double-edged sword if both edges were pointed at you. What I mean by that is that, like, for people who aren't really strong in science, this makes the science section seem really, really scary, and they feel like, oh, I might as well not study for it because I'm going to do poorly anyways, because I haven't learned all of this. The other, and maybe the worst one, is that people like me, who in high school were really strong in science, looked at it and was like, I'm really strong at science. I took AP physics, I took AP chemistry, I took AP biology. I don't need to really study for this, right? It's super easy. Now, the reason why that's a myth, and this is the most dangerous misconception for all students of all science backgrounds, is that actually the ACT science section doesn't test scientific knowledge. So it doesn't matter that you took AP physics, AP bio, or whatever advanced level science class. It tests your scientific reasoning skills. And you really don't need any advanced knowledge or expertise to do well on the ACT science section. And the reason this misconception is particularly troublesome for students is that it leads students to underprepare or prioritize memorizing concepts, like the knowledge that you learn in school, that really isn't the primary focus of the test. Like, make no mistake about it, the science section is the most difficult of the ACT sections, mostly because people don't prepare correctly. Now, of course, you need a base level understanding of the fundamental scientific concepts, to do the test. But as we'll see, it's testing more than just those concepts. So now you might be asking me, what does the ACT science section even test? And if you're telling us it's not testing the knowledge that I learned in school or in my other classes. So there are some natural science topics that the ACT will cover, but as you'll see, you really don't need an extensive expertise in any of these subjects, even if they might sound scary. So basic concepts in biology, chemistry, earth science, physics, astronomy, and astrophysics are fair game for the test. But again, even though astrophysics sounds really scary, you really don't need to know a whole lot.
Quick question right here. Okay. It's me. Yeah, I just read one of the student test to me. They say for the biology, chemistry, earth science, physics, and astronomy, which one is the hardest to improve in a short time?
The hardest to improve in a short time. I feel like the hardest ones are the ones where you just really, if you haven't taken like biology, it's really hard to figure those out. Um, like if you don't have a base understanding of biology, I think that would be the hardest one. Because physics, a lot of that is just mostly calculation, and the concepts are pretty basic that they test in this. But if you haven't heard of like what photosynthesis is, uh, like that takes a bit longer to study for than most of your other sciences.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. So I'll give you a couple examples of what level of knowledge you should be at while you're taking the ACT. So I'll read the question. I'll give you like maybe 30 seconds to respond to it. So according to the information provided, the force due to gravity acting on each pipe during the experiment was closest to which of the following? A, 10 newtons, B, 50 newtons, C, 100 newtons, and D, 150 newtons. And after 30 seconds, I'll give an explanation.
Ten, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I think time's up.
Yeah. So you see how fast these things go, because you really don't want to be spending a lot of time on the kind of knowledge-based questions. These should come really quickly. So the first thing to notice is that the passage tells us that the pipe is 10 kilograms in mass. Now, mass is different from weight, right? If you've learned physics, you would know that very well. And it's asking us for the force due to gravity, which is the weight. So if you've taken physics, the force due to gravity is the mass times the acceleration due to gravity, g, which in this case, we've approximated to be about 10. I know people are going to be like, oh, it's 9.8, whatever. It's for the purposes of the ACT, you can consider it 10 meters per second squared. So if you multiply 10 kilograms by 10 meters per second squared, you get 100 newtons. And a newton is just kilograms times meters per second squared. So that's pretty basic physics. If you've taken pretty much any physics class, you would have the numbers, but they don't tell you what the acceleration due to gravity is. So that's an example of something you would need to know. Let's move on to the next one. Again, after I read the question, I'll give you 30 seconds, and then I'll give an explanation. So in eukaryotic organisms, the chemical reactions associated with the chemical equation shown in the passage typically occur within which of the following structures? F, chloroplasts, G, mitochondria, H, lysosomes, or J, nuclei? 30 seconds starting now.
"30 seconds, finish."
Okay. So the correct answer for this one is, so the chemical equation shown in the passage is the one up above, if you didn't figure that out. And the correct answer is chloroplasts. Now this is because the equation is 6 carbon dioxides plus 6 water forms C6H12O6, which is sugar, and 6 oxygens. Now that's the equation for photosynthesis, which is what plants use to turn solar energy into sugar. And that happens, as somebody who's taken biology would know, in the chloroplast. So
sorry to interrupt. There's
Okay.
a quick question join. They say, is it possible to practice scientific reasoning skills on our own?
Well, the key is that you would be learning a lot of these in your science classes, but at the same time, like scientific reasoning skills, you would also learn by taking ACT practice tests. Like that's the best way to study for the kind of scientific reasoning you're expected to do on the ACT.
Thank you. And also, I would like to ask everybody to give me the Q&A, like question, like later after, Brian finished. Okay, thank you.
Okay. So what I wanted to emphasize is that rather than just these kinds of questions, you might get 4 of these out of 40 in the entire section. The science test measures the interpretation, analysis, evaluation, reasoning, and problem-solving skills required in the natural sciences. And this is a direct quote from ACT Incorporated, which I'm sure you can guess what they do. So in essence, the ACT science section is more similar to ACT reading than to ACT math. It's a passage-based section, as I've mentioned before. So I'll go over some of the rules for ACT reading. So for every multiple choice question on the ACT, which is incidentally all of them, there's only one and only one answer is 100% correct. And by correct, I mean every word in the answer is supported in the passage. And your job is to find that 100% correct answer. Not the 50%, not the 95%, the 100%. You're not expected to become an expert on the topic of the passage. There's no way in like 40 lines or so that you'd become an expert on astrophysics. You only need to care about the part that really supports the correct answer. And you have to read carefully and precisely. So you want to read exactly what the passage says without missing anything important or adding anything that's not in the passage. This is really dangerous for people who've taken stuff like AP Physics or AP Bio, because the temptation is always that, oh, I know more than the passage does. And the test makers' response to that is, we don't care. So there are some extra rules for ACT Science on top of those that I just mentioned. So labels and graph are especially important, and they're really tricky. So you want to read labels on the top, bottom, left side, and right side of the graphs. And you want to use the right data for the question. If they're asking for a certain experiment, you want to refer back to the right experiment or graph or table that's asked in the question. Don't get intimidated by unfamiliar science vocabulary. They don't expect you to know every word. And there are only a couple times per test where you need to know the basic science that we just went over, which I've said is around 2 to 4 questions. So now there are a couple passage types, 3 of them to be exact. There's something called data representation, research summary, and conflicting viewpoints. So the first passage type, and arguably the easiest kind of passage, is the data representation passage. These passages are similar to the publications found in scientific journals. If you read them for fun, that's good for you. These passages will be pretty easy for you then. They're usually 1 to 2 short paragraphs plus 1 to 4 visual representations of data. And what that means is graphs, tables, etc. And your job for these passages is to read, interpret, and explain information presented in these graphs and tables. Now, I just wanted to show you what this looks like, and an example of a problem that would go along with it. I don't expect you to really try to solve it yourself, because that would take too much time. So here we have 2 paragraphs, a chemical equation, 1 table that says table 1 on it, and another graph that gives us a bunch of different curves. And our question, the job that they're asking us to do is, based on table 1, if the volume of H2 produced by day 10 from AWP1 sample had been measured, it would most likely have been. So we notice that there's day 2, day 4, day 8 for AWPs 1 through 3. And on AWP day 8, we have 133. And we see a trend for each of these. So 4 goes to 33, goes to 81, goes to 133. So, it's going up by maybe 40-ish, 50-ish each time. So we would eliminate F because there's no way we would expect it to go down based on that trend. We'd eliminate H and J because that would be a huge jump in 2 days based on our trend. And that's why we would get the answer G. So that table, while there was a lot of information in it, was relatively straightforward. Some of these graphs can be really, really tricky. And if you look at this graph, you see, what is even going on? Is this even English? This is crazy. And this is a real graph found on one of the real passages on the ACT. So learning to read these graphs effectively and efficiently for the information you need is a critically important skill for ACT science. Our second passage type is a research summary. These focus on specific experiment or a specific set of experiments, usually labeled like experiment 1, 2, 3, and they'll mention somebody, a scientist or a student, who conducts each experiment. And then for these, you want to understand the purpose, methods, and result of the experiment. So here we have, again, two paragraphs for background, a table, and 3 experiments with figure 1 and a table 2. And the question being asked is, which of the 2 fields from experiment 3 would be better to use in an engine that will run at all engine speeds between 1500 RPM and 3500 RPM. So we look at experiment 3 because it's asking us for experiment 3. And experiment 3 is talking about the engine octane requirement. You don't need to know what that is off the top of your head. All you know is that, it tells you what the engine octane requirement means. It's the minimum octane number of a fuel required for an engine to operate without being damaged. So we see they give us, at each engine speed, they give us an EOR, and they give us the octane number for fuel A at that RPM. And our answer ends up being A, fuel A, because the octane number is higher than the EOR at each of the engine speeds tested. Because they're testing what the octane number is at each speed, we need it to be higher than the minimum octane number for an engine to run at that speed. And only fuel A satisfies that requirement, whereas fuel B doesn't satisfy that requirement at 1500 RPM. So that's how you would do that question. And then the third and most difficult passage type is a conflicting viewpoints passage. And this is the most unique and challenging passage type because it's very different from the other 2. The other 2, they kind of look the same. This one contains 2 short essays representing conflicting scientific viewpoints or theories. And if you've taken any prep on ACT reading, you know that sounds kind of like a paired passage. So each ACT science section will contain one of these passages. They're not going to let you, get off scot-free without having to go through one of these. And these test your ability to understand, analyze, and compare alternate viewpoints or hypotheses. So this is what it would look like. So you see they give you a couple lines of background, a paragraph explaining scientist 1's ideas, a paragraph explaining scientist 2's ideas, and a paragraph explaining scientist three's ideas. And what you need to know is the difference between the ideas, dependent on the background that they've given you. So 14 is just a background question. It's asking whether gravity is likely to accelerate gas particles inward or outward, and does RP accelerate gas particles inward or outward. And if you read the passage, it ends up telling us that gravity pulls it inwards, whereas RP pushes it out. 15 is a more interesting question because it asks us to, based on scientist two's argument, do gas particles more likely accrete near the equator or near the poles of a protostar with a disk? Now, each of these scientists have a different idea about what gas particles are likely to do. And in this case, scientist two argues that there'd be more gas particles near the equator because, according to him, the effect of RP is reduced there. Now, me explaining this might seem really easy because I'm doing all of the work here. When you're actually doing this in a testing setting, it's often confusing to, you often get these different scientists' theories all mixed up. And what they're asking you to do is really understand the differences between them. So now that I've shown you like why the ACT science section is important and what they're testing you on, what do I need to do as a student to succeed on ACT science? The key is the overarching goal is to develop a test-taking strategy. You really don't want to go into this test just winging it, like completely blind, just improvising based on whatever you see. You want to really know what you're doing going into it and how you work most effectively to solve each of these problems. Something that I suggest all students to do is consider what order you're doing the passages in, because you really don't want to feel obligated to do the order in the do the passages in the order that's given to you on the ACT. So most students, I would suggest doing the data representation first, then the research summary, and saving the conflicting viewpoints, the hardest passage by far, for the very end, so that if you run out of time, it's on the hardest part rather than on a really easy part. And then you have to guess and lose points on the really easy part. A key strategy for the ACT science section is knowing how to locate the right information, because there's a lot going on in each of these passages. And they'll ask questions that are intentionally confusing, because if they make a test where everybody gets full credit, it's not a very useful test to differentiate people by their ability. So one of the key skills for the ACT science part is making sure you really pay attention to your main locators. Like figure 1, table 1, you want to look at figure 1, not table 1, not figure 2. You want to locate the right figure or table. If it says based on the results of study 1, you want to look at the results of study 1, which will usually be in the corresponding table or figure of the correct study, not study 2, not study 3. If it says based on study 1, then it could either be in the text describing study 1 or in a figure associated with study 1. If it says according to the information provided or according to the passage, those are a little bit more difficult, but the locator then is in the text. So you need to read the background at that point. Another useful skill is to think about your second locators, like your units, like meters, second, kilograms, etc. If they're asking you to find a weight, or then you're not going to be looking for kilograms. You're going to be looking for newtons. If they're asking you for a distance, you're not going to be looking for a time. And that sounds really obvious when I say it, but it can get really confusing if you're not used to paying attention to units. You also want to pay attention to your science terminology. So like pH, temperatures, deposits, whatever, like what reaction, anything. And you don't really have to know what that word actually means. You just need to know that if you're being asked about that word, wherever that appears in the passage is where you want to be focusing. As I've said before, you really want to look at your X and Y axis labels and pay close attention to the rows and columns of tables, because these will tell you your results and tell you a relationship between the different variables that you might be asked about. And lastly, you always want to consider your answer choices, because this is a multiple choice test. They're giving you extra information in these answer choices. It's not like you have to work forwards. You can also work backwards. You can eliminate answer choices, which is a key strategy for the entire test or any standardized tests that you might take. Yeah. And remember that really complicated graph that I showed you before, the crazy one with like hearing thresholds and all that stuff? That really shows you why you need to use your pencil. A lot of people on multiple choice tests, they think, oh, I can just look at it and then the answer will come to me and I'll bubble it in. You really want to use your pencil, because if you've got different lines and curves, the ACT is printed black and white because they're cheap. And so you'll have like dotted lines, dashed and dotted lines, and it gets really crazy. And that confuses a lot of people, including me. So you want to write labels to identify multiple lines and curves. Make sure you've got the right one. You want to draw lines. And even a second pencil will help you draw straight lines. So when they're asking you for whatever the value of the y is at a given value of x, you're not skewed somewhere and mess up that way. And you want to circle or write data, especially when you've got multiple tables involved. So you tell your brain where to look at, because you're tired and your brain might just mess up, and you might start looking at table 2 even though you're supposed to be looking at table 1. I know that this happened to me during my ACT science test, so yeah, that was unfortunate. So I'm going to wrap up with some key takeaways. So I hope if you haven't been paying attention, pay attention now. And if you forget everything else, remember these 3 things. ACT science tests scientific reasoning, not content. Most of the ACT science is going to be on your problem-solving skills, your ability to read and understand what's going on. Not like if you've taken AP physics or AP bio, because if you're that kind of student who's overconfident and expects to do really well just because you know a bunch of stuff, then you're a lot like me back in high school when I took the ACT, because I thought I would get a perfect score on the ACT science section. And I got back, I did really well on the other sections, and my lowest score was actually in science, and that was kind of a blow to my ego. Yeah. And that's especially true for parents as well, because my dad assumed that I would do well in science and I did not. He was not very happy with me about that. So the second key takeaway is that ACT science is important for everyone, not just science students. Again, colleges are looking at your total ACT score, your ACT composite score. And if it doesn't matter how well you do on the other sections, if you're just tanking the ACT science test and just pulling your score down by a bunch. And if you are a science student, then it should be really clear why ACT science is important for you. And it's really critical to develop an effective strategy if you want to succeed at ACT science. Again, you don't want to go in blind. You don't want to just wing it, I'll do it whenever I do it. You want to know what you're doing going in, have an action plan, and have a really solid strategy where you really know what to do in what situation. Okay? That's all the content that I have for this open class. We're going to move on to Q&A and other information with June and myself. So
you. Thank you. Just in case somebody gonna type Chinese and I need to help Brian out. Okay, so it's just better just type your question in English. So now it's Q&A time. Okay，大家可以问一下我们的问题。Brian 老师是冷静成熟这个理智派啊，这学理科的老师是不太一样。Okay, so I kind of would like to learn a lot from you because next time when I talk in a seminar, I would just try to slow down my the speed. Okay, 我就是说话太快。Okay，上次有跟我说。这个听我前面一个字、最后一个字、中间字全都听不太清楚了。Okay, I'll try to make it clear. Okay, all right. So now it's time for you to. It's just better to type your question and then in the chat box or privately message me. Okay, just because if I allow you to talk, maybe the other students is hard to here or also it's just faster. Okay, so either you can just test me here or you can test me in the WeChat or whatever. Let's see, what is the question? So we just finished one of question like, is it possible to practice scientific reasoning skills on your own? So Brian, I heard like you mentioned like you used to practice science ACT by yourself, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then what's the result?
Well, I didn't do so well on the science ACT part because nobody really told me what I was doing wrong.
So the first time?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So you don't really suggest the student to practice by their own, right?
Well, you want to practice it, but you don't want to just, do endless ACT science practice without really looking at what patterns you have going wrong, what kind of questions you're getting wrong. You don't want to practice and not reflect on your practice, right?
Yeah, I totally agree with you. Well, even it sounds like we're promoting the class, but actually it's true because I'm trying to, talk to the student because a lot of students, they try to practice a lot. They say, I'm going to finish 10 books or 20 practices. Then I'm going to go back to ask you the question. I would say that's too late because you keep practicing, you emphasize the mistake, both together with the right question, right answers. So when you emphasize the wrong answers, and it's hard for us to correct it,
Yeah.
All right. Any questions? Okay. I got one question on the WeChat. Missed the first half of the ACT lecture. Can you give me the video? Okay. All right. So yeah, we do record this seminar, and if you need to replay it, or you can just contact me in either email or WeChat, and I can send to you later. Okay. All right. Any more question? Okay. All right. Let's see. I don't know how to make Wang Yao. I don't know how to make you talk. I only know how to lower your hand. So I saw you raise your hand, right? So Anna, okay, so Wang Yao. Okay, so maybe you can just test your question. If you have already any question, you can just test your question. Or you can just call us and to ask Brian in person. Okay, so our class, Brian gonna teach the class 3-week science, boost, and strategy. And most of the class is like pretty short because we want to combine everything all together. And we will cut in a short way, save your time. And it's starting like October 6th. Yeah, Fridays, 6 to 8 p.m. Okay, today we start the SAT essay class. So it's going to be October. Okay, so if you want to know more, you can just contact us. Okay, our phone number is, Brian, do you mind if you share this next slide?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, okay. All right, so this is our phone number, okay? So I hope you can just call or you can just go to our website to know more information. All right. Okay, so I got some questions on WeChat and probably, Brian, I will invite you to answer them in WeChat. Is that okay? All right. Okay, so thank you for joining us. And if there's no more question, and we're going to finish today's seminar. And thank you again for everybody's time. And yeah.
Looks like we just got another Q&A.
Right
Somebody
here?
said, I have a question.
Oh, okay.
But they didn't write their question. I
Okay,
would
let's
invite
wait a little bit. Yeah, let's wait a little bit. Okay, maybe they try to figure out how to type right here.
Yeah.
Okay, so like what I said, we also gonna have like AP seminar later, and we're gonna invite a very strong teacher. And right now we're working on a college essay editing right now, so we have tons of essay to edit every single day, and then we only can sleep like I sleep like every day like 2 a.m. because this is like ED time, a lot of essay, you know, and some of the kids, they think their essay is already done, and they come to me and I was like, oh, this is not approved essay. You have to start from scratch, which is scary, but anyway. Okay, so question, is this 3-week class cover all the ACT section? How many practice tests? Well, I would say 3 weeks class only cover ACT science section, okay? Because we realize that for the science section is the weakest part for most of students, and for the English section and the reading section is easier by giving you practice and find out like your mistake, specific mistake. So let's see, the ACT science is like having more common problem, and the English and reading section has different problem. It's like very from person to person. Yeah. And the cost is $399. $399. That's another question from Selena.
Okay.
Okay, any more question?
We have another question that says, besides doing the passages in a certain order, do you have any other strategies? Now, there's a different strategy for each one of the passages, and there's really a lot of information that I can't go over in just, you know, an hour. So there, like each question, you're focusing on a different thing. You really need to focus on what each question is really asking. And I know that sounds kind of vague, but that's where most people make their mistakes. Because you really just got to focus on precise, like looking at the correct answer choices, looking at the correct problem. Like if you're great at problem solving, but you solve the wrong problem, that's not useful, right? So, and I also mentioned the primary locators that that really help you steer in the right direction for each individual question. Is that good?
Thank you. I think it's good enough. Yeah. All right. So you can also call us and ask more questions to Brian. Okay. Okay. So we're gonna have like 1 more minute and to see if there's any question. Okay. So, all right. So if you're already in our WeChat group, okay, stay. If you're not, just let me know. I can put you in. So each time we have open class, we will just send information in the group, and also you can just join us and ask questions in the group. Okay. All right. Thank you for joining us again. It's a Friday or Saturday. It's a Friday, right?
Yeah, it's Friday. Yeah. Friday evenings, California time.
Yeah, and we're gonna do the same way, like what we're having the seminar right now. So it's gonna be pretty easy for everybody.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. So thank you again for your time.
Yeah.
And if you have more questions, please call us. Our phone number is 408-216-9109. Thank you, Brian. Thank you again.
Thank you, everyone, for coming.
Thank you, everybody. Have a good evening. Bye-bye.
Bye.